Happy Monday, everyone. And let's go ahead and get started. So I had a couple of items for today. Folks, let me know if you have any more as we get through this. One, I wanted to talk about moving SCIM to OpenSSF and plans for that. And then we just a note about an upcoming SCIM Salsa Sync, and we are ready to start, at least on Microsoft's side, we're ready to start creating evidence schema for our EO related content. And so I think that happens in a community outside of this one, but I thought I would bring it up here. So, okay, so to start off then, I have for SCIM to OpenSSF, I'm planning to bring it up at the Technical Advisory Council meeting for the OpenSSF tomorrow. They have a pretty full agenda, so I'm not sure if we will get time to discuss that tomorrow. If not, it'll be in 2 weeks out. Bob, you've got a hand up?
Yeah, I just wondered what ever happened to our discussion about renaming? Because I just went to YouTube to find the SCIM sessions, and there's another active effort that calls itself SCIM, and I found their YouTube videos more than I found ours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll do that, and I've been holding off on that. I feel like once we get through, and this is related to the second agenda item, which is that we're talking, well, I mean, part of it's even happening in this meeting. So we're talking with the Entoto community, we're talking with the salsa community. I think we might want to try to bring some of these things together a little closer than they are, and and maybe that impacts the direction we go with SCIM. So I've just been keeping that in a holding pattern for now. Just FYI, inside of Microsoft, a new group is just getting formed, and this will have all of our security teams in it. The name of the group is Security, Compliance, Integrity, and Management, SCIM. And so this will be this big division with 1,000+ people in it. And so people have been pinging me all week, oh, you're going to need to rename your project. So anyway, we'll get to that, but for the moment we're just making progress as is.
Yeah. So just as a highlight, supply chain integrity management is literally the name, not the acronym, that I'm selling this with.
Okay.
Because it is supply chain integrity management, facilitated by software tools that are go-to tools. That is what I tell people. If you want to do SCIM, and that's not SCIM, that's why I'm saying SCIM. Yeah. And you want to have an idea which standard tool to use, how to have the transparency that you want, and how to have the protected evidence that you might not want to store there, but just reference, then, or obfuscated, encrypted, then SCIM, what we're doing here, whatever we call this, is for you. And that is anticipating that we will change the name. And I know that it's also simple cloud identification management, which is bad. So that's my conflict. We can't call it that. But from the content wise, I think SCIM is exactly what we do. And we just have to find a more unique name for it. And we had a discussion, we had a list here. What I really want to highlight, this is supply chain integrity management. And unfortunately, that is an overloaded term, but this is what we do.
Okay. Just wrapping back to the specific bullet item, the intent is still to, name aside, the intent is to get the project over to OpenSSF. And once we have it there, then we can do the things like create and get repos. And we'll end up having two things. We'll have a project, which is the community and where there can be any shared code. And then we'll have the standard as a separate repository. So there'll be at least two repositories, one for code, one for specification. And then, as we're doing that, we can, I think it will be interesting for us to discuss open sourcing the SCIM application. And we've talked around this before. Sylvan, I know that we've had concerns about not wanting to do this until we had another partner. I think we are probably getting close to having Google in that role. So we should be thinking more about that, but we can wait until after the meeting with Google.
There's no concerns about open sourcing. That's not the issue at all. So CCF has been open source for a number of years, and the actual code for the implementation will go open source as soon as it's ready. It's a question of what does governance look like, and or is governance even a priority, or how is it structured? That's a more difficult question. But in terms of open source, everything will be open source.
One route we can go is we can move over to OpenSSF and just use their standard governance templates for projects. They're not very, I mean, they indicate that the project needs to start with something like at least 3 maintainers or something. We can look at the governance documents. But they don't define a ton more than that to get started with. And then, over time we could, once more people are contributing and there's a need for more more clearly defined governance, we could go that way. Sarah and Steve are pretty big on the term minimum viable governance. So you get started and then you add more as needed. But that can be a separate topic.
I don't want to jump like too far ahead.
Sure.
Are we still? I mean, in a sense, the OpenSSF move would also imply some sort of like a connection with a SCIM. Is this like the time to talk about it, or should we wait for the next bullet point? I think there's like some governance questions that I have about that.
So I would be happy to hear what you mean, because I don't know if this is related.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. Sorry.
So yeah. So no. Kay, sorry. You do. You please. The floor is yours. You answer this question, please.
Yeah. I can bring back to our meeting next week some more information about the standard governance model inside of OpenSSF, and then we can discuss governance in more detail. Does that?
Yes.
Okay.
So the thing that is really interesting to me is that I have to capture this here live in a recording. OpenSSF is a Linux Foundation project, and I'm happy with that. I think that model has proven to work most of the times, and only license-wise, sometimes it's a gateway function, which is fine. I think not everything should get through. That's good. And so governance of that, I think, is a detail. So as long as it's open source, as Sylvan said, and as long as we control a majority of non-harmful licenses, which is possible there, I guess, I think that is fine. And then the governance details we can defer.
Yeah, in terms of licensing, we'll do MIT license for everything. So CCF is MIT license, and we'll MIT license everything we put out. It's sort of the default Microsoft code license.
It's also the default in OpenSSF.
That's not necessarily default in OpenSSF, but it's common.
I thought the default for Linux Foundation was Apache too, but I mean, this doesn't matter much. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, we had the discussions in OpenSSF and decided to have MIT, but groups can choose something different if they want, but the default
Exactly.
is MIT.
Okay, I'm just pissed.
All of these are fine. These are all lovely, friendly licenses. So really, the point is that
No,
there's
MIT is on the
nasty.
best side. It is on the brightest side of the force.
Mhm.
So-
It is the most brightest side.
So what pisses me off is that I in total was licensed MIT, and then I was told to relicense to move to Linux Foundation to like CNCF to
Oh,
Apache
okay.
2. And I don't know how many relicensing can my
We had
community
a
afford.
situation with that with CCF where
Oh.
we licensed CCF under MIT. We were told to relicense it in order to make the Hyperledger Foundation happy, and we're like, we don't work with them, and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I even told them like because you can double license it. You can do MIT plus Apache 2, and they were like, no, that's not gonna fly. You can do Apache 2, and here we are.
All right. Yeah,
How do you
I
want to do
don't think that'll be a problem.
AGPL? I think that is fine.
Okay, that's all I had for SCIM to OpenSSF. Did you have another question about that, Santiago, or were your questions later when we start talking about the schema?
So I just feel that maybe it would be appropriate to just scope like what the level of SCIM Salsa collaboration would be in terms of it seems that Salsa has already like a very settled governance like board even. And I'm just trying to picture like, would it be like there's a merge and then there's some sort of like, we take the existing group of people that's on the governing board of like Salsa. I don't know if it's COC, TAC, whatever. And then like add some people from SCIM, or is it more like they're essentially separate entities, but they have some sort of like recurring sync calls or?
Yeah, it is too early to even speculate on that. So we know
Gotcha.
that between Google and Microsoft, we want to have a story between the both of those. So how they technically how they fit together, and then also how the groups work together. And our first meeting to discuss that is on the 30th of September. Thank you, Aranda.
Yeah, so I'm trying to be polite at some point, so I'm not interrupting people. Yeah, so the from my speaking from experience, so what you have to figure out is who has the authority on the how this goes. So the idea is to meet the idea is to meet and to align two vectors. They might have overlap, they might cross, there might be multiple vectors, there might be trees meeting here, and some branches meet, and some might not. And that is the intricate discussion, that is the compromise. And that is, of course, the task. And then, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, one has to have the authority to make a decision at some point. So if two parties meet, you might arrive at an impasse. Just speaking from experience. And so that might be a preamble to all of this. So we know the two trees meet here. We have a subset, and the majority of subtrees that is involved does not win the authority. We have to have a separate discussion on who has the authority now to steer this. So these are typically as a layer decision, typically with two different types of people involved. One of the technical level that align how the subtrees overlap and then see the common vision here. And then typically there's another discussion on, so now is who's doing the facing to the customer, which is the world in open choice. So that is the second step, and I've seen this fail a lot. Sorry to say this out loud. So I really want this not to fail. So please be careful with each other there, not on the tree sharing realm, which is just more or less technical, but on the who takes charge of the compromise building part of the thing. And Kay, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here because you're you probably are well aware of all of this, but just want to speak this out loud once, and now I will shut up.
Yeah, we might not actually merge the communities in any way. They might, go on and be their own separate communities. There are places, I mean, they've been more focused on defining policies for software security, and we've been more focused on defining a store. So, so we might end up saying, yeah, you guys run with that, we'll run with this, and we'll, cross-pollinate to make sure we're in sync. So.
Yeah, but still there should be, and I think that is a very valuable goal, is to have this common story. This is why this works together so well.
Right.
But then in the end, two equal heads cannot really steer that story because they might not always be in agreement. So there has to be a governance thing, we still like to call it, that would steer the story long term. So establishing the foothold here. Okay, this makes sense enough to do the story, and then from there step onto the ladder that leads up to the target, and then we have to understand how the story is maintained, because every party can add features or get chapters to the story, and that might not be orchestrated as such as the agreement of the starting point. So that's the only thing I want to highlight. That even if the communities stay separate, the story will be a shared one, and the story has to be well maintained. It has to be consistent. It has to be kept. There has to be a subtle governance thing for the story. It doesn't need big overhead, but I think it's very important to show the consensus, and not all the details that are in the weeds downstairs, and the dissents that sometimes arise from that, because that is standardization thing 101, But you want to have the big story to show the consensus and the agreement, and that needs some government authority, even if it's minimal. That's my comment here.
Yeah, good point. And maybe we accomplish that, kind of the owner of the big story through OpenSSF, because that's we lost you for a second, Hank, because that's where we're aiming for these projects that are related to supply chain security to meet up. But anyway, you're right, we have to have that discussion and agree to that. Okay. Then the last item that I had on the agenda is, and this is specific to Microsoft, but we're at the point now where we need to begin. Yogesh Deshpande. I don't know who that is. Is that the ARM guy? Hank, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just admitted him. Yeah, that's ARM. Exactly.
That's ARM?
I think
okay, great.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Yeah,
I hope you guys, I can see everyone. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, and we can
Okay.
see you as well. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, welcome. My apologies, my sincere apologies for the delay. I got something last minute. So I was very passionate. I was very keen to join and meet you all. And I'm very sincerely sorry for the delay.
Sure, no trouble. We're recording this, Yogesh, so you'll be able to go back and find out what you missed, if you like. We had one more topic on our agenda for today, and then maybe that I don't know that it will take the rest of our time, and maybe we can loop back and spend a little more time with introductions to you, and then thinking about how ARM might fit into the work that we're doing.
Sure.
Okay. So the last item that we're starting to discuss is, I was starting to describe that within Microsoft, we are working hard to meet the requirements from the May 25th, I think it was, U.S. White House executive order on cybersecurity, and that has a number of requirements for software. So things like creating software bill of materials, build environment security, meeting software testing practices. So for all of those, our aim is to produce content in a standard format and then encourage the industry to do likewise. And then that way we can share information across the supply chain about have all of our products met the requirements for EO conformance. What we have been talking about at the schema level, and I'm talking about sort of the details. So if we're producing a document in, let's say it's in JSON format or whatever, and it's describing the testing that we've done, we need to say what we desire to say is, okay, here are the type of tests that were run, and here are at a summary level, here are the results of those tests. We have been looking at using SPDX3 for this. So SPDX has a model where it has this tight core where you can describe a piece of software or any element. We call them artifacts. So any software or SPDX3, we're planning that it could also support hardware or any type of artifacts. So kind of our core is an artifact. So we have this very small minimal profile to describe an artifact and then relationships between artifacts. And then we have additional profiles that can be layered on top of that. So you can have a profile that says, here's an SBOM. You can have another profile that says, here are the results of a software test suite, et cetera. So that's why we've been looking at SPDX3. And originally my note here was going to be that for Microsoft, that's where we're leaning. And so our thought is to start working with the SPDX3 community to add new profiles where profiles are missing from what we're needing. And then Santiago mentioned also that Intodo has semantics to describe these actions. And so then I thought we should spend a little time thinking about how SPDX3 and Intodo fit here. I do know that for Salsa, they're using Intodo link metadata, although now they call it attestations, I think. We'll let Santiago correct me in a second.
No, you're right.
And then, those can contain SPDX3 documents. So I think there's a good chance we do both, which is there's, in Toto as I'll call it a wrapper, kind of a wrapper around SPDX3 content. So go ahead, Santiago.
I wanted to kind of put my perspective on this. I think that there's good synergy between SPDX and Intodo, and part of where I think the distinction lies is that I think SPDX is very good at expressing about things that you are able to develop in shop, as in like you have control and jurisdiction over what was made, and then to link things together, the semantics on Intodo can be used to essentially start connecting, say, things that were done by an external entity to the same software artifact and write policy around these types of attestations. The reason why, and like I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the goal for SPDX is it seems to me that, and anybody can correct me here, but it started as something that on like version 1 was around policy a lot, then it was like around software packages. Now it's starting to also encompass development practices like testing or building. And I think this is useful, but at the same time, I wonder how does it reconcile with a bunch of other things that are out there that are essentially just doing one small thing and doing it right. Part of my hesitation was earlier on I used to be working on the linking profile. And the linking profile was essentially an Intodo type, but I realized that if I insert the Intodo type instead of SPDX, then you would have essentially a meta document full of sub-documents that are all of them signed by different entities. And it seems to me that then it would be like some weird overwar of like attestations. Sure, Hank, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, again, I'm trying to retain order once in a while. So what I personally perceive as SPDX is excelling at is, of course, the list of licenses. So that's what they bring to the table. And then they can express packages and the files itself and the integrity measurements, which are hashes, very well. So integrity measurements of files are a common denominator across other formats, for example, like SWIT, that also is doing it even better than SPDX, but that doesn't matter. So let's keep it at SPDX for now. And so what SPDX really can do is if you look at the ISO lifecycle specification, the exact number eludes me right now. This is the system R&D. So when you create all the things and have the snippets and the signed commits in GitHub, for example, or somehow, and the provenance of the software creation, that is where SPDX's focus is on. And all the snippets and all the other things that are maybe inherited from third parties are licenses. And so that's SPDX realm. So I think, and you're wondering why SPDX is so interesting to this, I think it's the R&D cycle of the software. And then at some point, there's an artifact that's not temporary because unit tests are eternal, but you really want to do a release, and then the handover takes place to the, I don't know, customer, whatever, who is using the artifact now. And that might be a package that goes into Linux. That might be I don't know, and a part of a software suite that's proprietary, and it's called something for your office space, and then you do email with it, and then you maintain all of these components. So SPDX is not so good at that, because they are stopping literally at the demarcation line. I'm talking about 2.2, 2.3 stuff, 2.21 ISO stuff. So that and then the management takes over. Then the system is a runtime. You deploy it, and then updates happen, management happen. Now the local policies where software runs come into place, and then there are vulnerabilities. So and then you realize in the real world, when your product is in place, that it doesn't work as it is intended to do. Some of these are traceable back to just defects in the software that are just because we coded this wrong. And then we coded this wrong due to open vulnerabilities. So it's not just crashing, but it's actually opening attack vectors. So now you want to have this feedback loop back into the software supply chain that remediates these problems. So now you have a continuous cycle going from software creation to software deployment, ownership, and then you expect another party that is totally outside the scope of SBOM to do, I don't know, the pen test stuff, the vulnerability checking, the white hat hackers, I don't know, and then CVE, yeah, something like a CVE. Maybe it's not as structured as such. Feedback into the creation cycle. In best case scenario, realizing your software product had a vulnerability, you can trace it back due to the SPDX part to the snippet, remediate that, and then see, oh, that snippet is used in 2,500 other components. Right. You should also fix probably. So that's a very prominent thing. So that is why these things go together, I think.
But so SPDX, I want to clarify what you're describing about SPDX and licenses and files and snippets. That was the world of SPDX 2.2, but the world of SPDX 3.0 is all of those things.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of swallowing up the semantics of SWID, allowing for SWID to have its own place or to be represented by the things learned from SWID. And I think that's what SPDX 3.0 is intending to be. It's intending to close the split cycle. that we have right now, from creation to deployment, creation being SPDX and deployment being SWID, and then closing that really up to a static, good, nicely designed whole loop, and that would be awesome. And then now allowing other representations. That is an encoding problem sometimes, but allowing other representations to take their own place in SPDX 3.0 is also a goal, I think. So whenever SWID or co-SWID does its thing well and it's established, it can take that part in the loop, and it's very interoperable with this loop. And I think that everybody involved really just wants this loop closed. They just want this loop closed and one thing to look at. And there comes the SCIM service. The service enables this to look at trustworthy thing. But then we have the contents that are the loop. And I think SPDX and SWID play an important role, and in Toto brings the cool policy part to it. You know? So I think that is where in Toto really excels, because that's not really the turf of SPDX and SWID, like the policies, how to deal with all of that. I think in Toto can make this, that's the contribution from my point of view, just me.
William?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, at a high level, the way to think about SPDX 3, I think this is consistent with what you just said, Hank. So, you know, hopefully this is just a summary. Like, the core describes artifacts and the relationships between those artifacts, and it provides a standard way to come along and attach information to that. And that information could be in SPDX documents itself, in that, you know, a great example would be, you know, there's a vulnerability profile where, you know, if you want to describe why certain vulnerabilities aren't exploitable, you could go and do that and put that in an SPDX document. But it could also be completely external to an SPDX document. Like, you could have something else that says, I want to refer to this SPDX element, and there's a standard way of doing that. So really the goal is to allow different ecosystems of information to tie together into a common graph.
So yeah, and I think that's what I've always wanted to do within Toto. That's kind of what I'm a little bit surprised about. In a sense, in Toto was a way to turn the whole supply chain security problem in one of, like, graph isomorphism, right? You would describe a policy as a graph, then you would see if you had an accepting series of symbols that accept this as a graph. I'm not trying to say that this is that, like, SPDX shouldn't be doing this. I'm trying to find, like, where exactly to draw the line, because part of what I was envisioning was that you could essentially sign SPDX documents and wrap them around in Toto links that say, hey, this is the document that's describing all of the internal, like, stuff about this software pipeline, and here's a bunch of pointers to other SPDX documents that were involved in answering this question. And then you can, again, start building a graph. And actually, if you squint a little bit, it really does turn into a hypergraph. Part of what Hank was talking about is that you have a collection of nodes that are a software stack, and that collection of nodes is actually a node in a hypergraph that's connected to other collections of nodes. And as things are starting to cycle with each other, then you update hypernodes in the hypergraph, and it just becomes a funny living blob of software artifacts. Part of what I would really love to see, and I think this is part of what I was trying to reel back when I was working on the linking profile, is that there's, I think, two small philosophies that you can have. One of them is you as an SBOM issuer, you can say, hey, this are all of the relationships. But at the same time, I think you can't answer this as an issuer of SBOMs, but rather as somebody who's observing the ecosystem. Say that you're observing, say, this Microsoft Ledger. You are able to identify these relationships by digging into the evidence, rather than just trusting the issuer itself, because the issuer doesn't have a global view. And that's also part of what I was trying to do, or I'm trying to do within Toto, that you can essentially introspect in what you found in a build system, right? You can include, like, full system provenance attestations to say, hey, I loaded all of these files in memory right before I built, so they are involved. I cannot tell you exactly how, but they are involved. And you can use this to start tracking things in a little bit more granular fashion. Now, the nice thing about SPDX is that you can start to give ownership to all of these things, right? You can say, well, this was loaded in memory. It came from this package that was available in the system at the time of build. And by the way, this is all of the information about this package that you can start to investigate. I don't know if all of this makes any sense to anybody.
It does. I think one of the important things about SPDX, like if you go back to SPDX's history, a lot of the times the person creating the SPDX document was never the original software producer. It was nearly always the consumer of the software or an auditor. And so it was designed to say, here is my perspective of this set of software artifacts. You obviously could do it as a BOM producer up front, and that was always what was encouraged. Like, go and provide an SPDX document with your software, so we don't have to do this downstream. But one of the interesting things is you can come along and say, here is Microsoft's interpretation of this software tree. And going back to your point about hypergraphs, different companies will have different assessments, like going back to licensing, of here is how we interpreted the licenses. And then an auditor comes along and says, well, here's how we interpreted it, and now you can do diffs between those and that analysis. And we're trying to do a couple of things in SPDX 3.0 to kind of make the original software producer concept a little bit more clear, introducing things like package URLs to say these two descriptions of software are talking about the same piece of software. But yeah, I completely agree with your first comment. Is I think Intodo and SPDX are complementary. There's going to be overlap, and it's probably a good idea to start digging into some of those and work out what we want to leverage where and how they play together.
Definitely. I think that's the bottom line that I would love to see, to kind of, again, as Hank was hinting, I think there's like a big vision, and it's a matter of just kind of making sure that all of the bits of the different parts of the vision fall into right, like off-the-shelf products. Sorry for cutting you off, by the way.
No, that's okay. The one last thing I wanted to add is, as far as attaching things to the SPDX graph, like some of the profiles, we're not strongly. We don't have a strong opinion on how the profiles are structured, just how they connect to the core. And so, there's no reason why, there can't be, here is how Intodo attaches to SPDX, or here is how even CycloneDX attaches to an SPDX document. That's been pretty important from the outset.
Okay,
Totally
we do have a couple of
that.
hands up, Hank, and then Yogesh.
Yeah, no, not to belabor Shrek too much, but this is all about layers. So, Shrek is a good example for the worst and the best things. So, as we have seen, so yeah, one layer is the. So there's a conundrum here. You want to be free how to express your things. You want to be encoding and serialization agnostic a little bit. And also you want to have deterministic function and interoperability, which is the antithesis to allowing everything. So what I see the surrounding infrastructure being is hard defined standardized operations on how to create and move and relate the interoperability of the then lower layer, so to speak, that is, I don't know, an SPDX SBOM or in total meta frame, I think it's called, right? And that. And these might be encoded differently, but the shell around of this has to be stable and one go-to tool, because there were always very conflicting requirements from the stakeholders, but they said we have to do it our way and how we did it always, and also we need this one standard tool to go to. And that is, of course, a conundrum that doesn't work. So the compromise here, I think, is that the SCIM work is the go-to tool, the one way that has a one format, one message type. You just take that library and it works. And then you have all the content format descriptions and guidance, how to parse and understand the contents here in the service, and align with that. And if you cannot do that, you can fall back to some maybe mandatory to implement stuffs. That's TBD. That's not part of the discussion here. But I think it's very important to highlight that you need this call home thing, that this one point to start at, that you're not confused about where to look at. And that is, I think, the thing we today call skimmed, future name TBD. And I think that's the Kickstarter for it all. And then we will find overlaps, and then we'll find the places for all of the stuff. And I think that's possible. But we have to really acknowledge and commit, I think, to the idea that SCIM will use a certain encoding and a very specific data definition language to express that encoding. So there's no ambiguity there to find how to find stuff. Otherwise, it will somewhat fall apart again. And that was just me.
Okay, thanks, Hank. Yogesh?
Sorry if there is a background noise. Is it too difficult?
No.
No.
Okay. So basically, I just wanted to say that still new to SPDX, I've followed in toto. But what challenges I see is that the dependencies, the software, as Hank once mentioned, is software is constantly evolving. So our dependencies also constantly evolve. So how do you track that ever-changing dynamism and track it properly, the graphs? What would be the right framework to handle that? My question would be that.
Without jumping too hard in, I think this is essentially like the last missing bit here. I gave a talk in a couple of places, but basically the way that I see it, and it does match a lot of the like layering conversation we have here, is you can think of it as like a pyramid of needs. You essentially need to have policy mechanisms for like individual steps. Then you can start connecting these individual steps, like security mechanisms, to create like pipeline level security, right? You secure from like source code to your release pipeline. Then you have a higher layer that starts connecting things at the interchain security level, right? You connect all of these pipelines to create this sort of like graph of different software artifacts compositionally being created together. And then you can, with this, and say this like a ledger that's being talked about in SCIM here, you can have a broader ecosystem level view of this as like a huge forest of graphs that are sometimes connected, sometimes not connected. And then you can also start creating like intelligent semantics to not only detect like security threats, but also predict security threats, right? At an ecosystem level. Say you start finding a left path come up, or you start finding a type of spotting attempt, or you start finding, I have this term borrowed from like some economic stuff. It's evidence of software cannibalism, right? You can think of software as empires. They can grow and they eventually start hollowing themselves up because they cannot expand as much as they should. You can start identifying these things at the like a human resources level as well, but you need to start from the very bottom, right? Like the lower layers that have like trustworthy evidence creation, so that you can build up all the way into a global software ecosystem graph.
Okay, and Sylvan, you
Sorry
had
for
a hand
the
up,
long
and then,
answer.
no, that's okay. Sylvan, you had a hand up, and then after that, I'm gonna make a proposal for next steps.
Great. I just wanted to call back to something that I think Hank was saying, and I apologize, Hank, if it's not quite what you were saying. But to my mind, for this particular group, I think it's extremely important that we understand how to get to the right up to the point of specifying the content type, so we can get transparency and discoverability and consistency and a really good ecosystem right up to the content type. And from the content type on, there are other working groups that are expert in that, right? I don't think we should be stepping on SPDX. We shouldn't be stepping on Intoto. I think there are a bunch of different approaches here. A lot of them have, I think, complementary value. I don't think that there's really a one thing here. There's a lot of different things. And I think, and I apologize, Yogesh, if this isn't anything that you're referring to, but what I took from what you were saying is we also need to understand that we're going to need to be flexible over content type in the future. That as people come up with new content types and ways to do this, we're going to need to allow that. So I want to be super principled and super concrete right up to the content type, and then I want to stop. I want to make sure that all these other working groups can work within that framework.
Yeah, let natural synergies happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
And that is the
Yes,
hard
but
shell
okay.
I was talking about. The hard shell, this is literally not growing deeper than the content type. That has to be well defined. That has to be the go-to point. If there's ambiguity there, then you can't get to the content type. You can't get to the ecosystem of formats. So unfortunately, we have to be more descriptive on that part. But if you arrive there, I think I'm not going to say everything goes, but it's more orderly set of various things.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my next steps proposal. So for thinking about this very detailed content that we want to support the EO scenarios, and this is the, what was contained in the software build, what were the build environment procedures, how was it, what are the operations for the build environment, what tests were run. I believe that we want the detailed schema that is SPDX3. And so, again, I'll say I think we need to go work in the SPDX3 community to create those detailed schema. And then the next layer up from that, I think we decide, is it some combination of the Intoto and the SCIM layer, where we talk about integrity over the content, and policy over the content. But for today, at least, I'm going to ignore that part and say, we'll keep working on that separately in this group. But for defining the detailed data that we need to conform to the EO, we'll do that work in the SPDX3 community.
Okay, that's a similar story to what I've been envisioning about amongst these different efforts. They each have part of what we need. They seem to be almost deconflicted and compatible. And so we need to enhance that and reward that and show how they play together to bring even more value together than they do separately.
Yep. And we don't have Ava with us today, but Ava she presented a little while back. She's been working on kind of an overall map of the ecosystem and how the parts fit together. So I know that we'll be able to discuss that again. And Ava is very keen to be helping bring clarity there. Okay. Yogesh, we didn't, let's wrap back to you, and maybe you can give us a quick introduction. So you work on ARM, tell us,
Sure.
what you're doing there, and then, maybe what thinking, if any, is happening in the ARM community in this space, and we can think about, do we want to get you involved in just our general meetings or the tech meetings, or where to go from there?
Sure. Thank you for, at the outset, I would like to thank you all again for inviting me to this meeting. And the kind of work we are doing in ARM is, I'm working in two projects. One is Verizon, which is an open source GitHub project dealing with attestation. So this is project which deals with device attestation on any environment attestation. So we are building a verifier, an open source verifier, which can potentially should be able to target all types of device formats. That's the end goal, whether it is Microsoft DICE or ARM platform, security architecture, PSA-based platforms. So that's one project I am working with. Second things, I'm working on the transparency framework with Google. So we are working on open source, improving the firmware discoverability and transparency of firmware releases through Google's Trillion efforts, Google Trillion transparency. And the question was supply chain security management. Yes, ARM is seriously and taking a deep view of the cybersecurity threats in this landscape, and would be keen to discuss this issue with wider forum, especially one of this is this forum. So going forward, we would love to be part of such initiatives. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah,
Any
that's
questions? Yeah. Yeah.
no, we welcome you here.
Thank you.
Sylvan, anything you want to add? I think, you know, our current implementation, which is CCF, is currently using currently based on Intel SGX, but we've been wanting, thinking and wanting to extend from that. So this could be a good opportunity for us.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll of course be porting that to SNP and on AMD hardware, and to TDX, and to Realms on ARM as soon as any of this stuff is available for us to roll out. We want to cover as many TEE platforms as we possibly can.
So, quick question of the GitHub org. I'm just kind of curious. I see a bunch of repos that look familiar, but is there one that I should just take a look at if I'm interested in like finding more out?
On CCF?
No, Verizon.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I can point you to that. The Verizon is the core verifier service, and there are docs as well. So I'm happy to kind of chat with you offline as well. We can run through that.
Cool stuff.
So,
Oh yeah. I was like I was curious because I was seeing like a SWID and
yes,
PSA
those are the
token and stuff like that. I was like,
Yes.
and CoRIM. It's like all of them look familiar. Is this like all coalescing here?
Yes. So the Verizon hosts the main core verification service, and those uses all the stuff which you mentioned, COSWID, SWID package, and the CORIM, which we are working in standards, which is a concept to take the hardware and firmware endorsements. We have been working within TCG, and I think Henk is one of the core members of that standards work we are doing, along with few of the ARM colleagues and Intel people from Intel as well, been part of that work. So that's something.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of work going on there. So I'm happy to kind of elaborate on that offline, or someday, maybe a few months later, I'm happy to present more about that project here as well.
Sounds exciting. On my side, I'll just play with it a little bit before asking any questions, just to make sure that
Absolutely.
I know what's going
sure.
on.
Sure. Welcome. Yeah.
Okay. We're at time, so thanks everyone. And there will be a tech meeting tomorrow for folks. I'm going to drop out of the tech meetings for a little while. I just have a super full calendar, but contact Mike for information about that.
So
All right,
can
thanks
we make
everyone.
sure you capture links to the meeting videos?
Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
was going to ask as well. Yes.
Yeah, from the GitHub site, there are links to the meeting videos.
Oh, they are on the GitHub. Okay, I didn't look there.
Yeah.
Okay. Because some of the meetings have links in the meeting notes.
Oh, okay, but not all of them. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I was searching in the YouTube and found the other SCIM.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.